At my wife's funeral, the scent of lilies still fresh in the air, my daughter stepped toward me with her husband gripping her arm, both of them staring at me, as if grief had no place on my face. She leaned in close enough that I could feel her breath, and said, "You're dead to us too." Her words cut through the prayers, the whispers, the quiet sobs of the people who had come to honor the woman I loved. I felt something inside me crack, but I didn't bow. I lifted my head and replied, "Then here's your mother's last wish." The room froze. A dozen heads turned. A few gasps echoed between the pews. Even the pastor lowered his book, waiting for what would follow. My daughter's smirk faltered just slightly. The truth is, betrayal looks different when daylight hits it, and humiliation stings twice as hard when wrapped in funeral black. They thought they could bury me along with her memory, but they had no idea what she had left behind or what I had been holding on to all this time. My name is Luther Grant. I'm 70 years old, a retired electrical contractor who spent 40 years building homes across Central Texas. I thought I understood how things were built to last: foundations, wiring, marriages. 45 years with Margaret taught me that love was the strongest current of all. I never imagined I would learn, standing beside her casket, just how quickly that current could be cut. The church smelled of lilies and old wood, scents that would forever remind me of loss. I stood in the front pew of Grace Fellowship in Austin, close enough to touch the polished oak casket where my Margaret lay in eternal stillness. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across her face, and I thought how she would have loved that light. She always said churches felt closer to heaven when the sun came through just right. Now she was closer to heaven than any of us, and I was left behind in a world that suddenly felt foreign and cold. 45 years, the pastor said during the service. 45 years of marriage, of shared meals and quiet evenings, of arguments that never lasted past sunset and laughter that filled every room she entered. He spoke of her kindness, her faith, her devotion to family. What he did not say, because he didn't know, was that Margaret had also been my shield. She stood between me and the sharper edges of life, softening blows I never even saw coming. Without her, I realized I was exposed. I felt their eyes on me before I heard their whispers. My daughter, Sarah, stood near the back of the church with her husband, Marcus, their heads tilted toward each other in private conversation. Sarah was 42 years old, a woman I had raised with my own hands, taught to ride a bicycle, helped through college, walked down the aisle at her wedding. But the woman whispering to Marcus was a stranger. She glanced at me with something that looked less like grief and more like impatience, as if the funeral were an inconvenience delaying more important matters. After the service, mourners formed a line to offer condolences. Old friends squeezed my hands. Neighbors from decades past embraced me with tears in their eyes. Margaret had touched many lives, and they came to honor her memory. But through it all, I watched Sarah and Marcus hang back, waiting. When the last mourner stepped away, Marcus approached with the precision of someone who had been counting the minutes. He did not offer sympathy. He did not mention Margaret's name. Instead, he said, "We need to talk about the arrangements, Luther, the house, the accounts. There are decisions to be made, and we should handle them quickly while everything is still fresh." My wife was not yet in the ground, and this man was already dividing the estate. I looked at Sarah, hoping to find my daughter behind those familiar features, but she avoided my gaze. Her silence was louder than any words. "Sarah," I said quietly, "can we speak privately? Just the two of us." She finally looked at me, but her expression held no warmth. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Marcus. He's family. Family." The word twisted in my chest like a blade. I had built this family with Margaret, brick by brick, year by year. Now my own daughter was drawing lines that placed me on the outside. Marcus smiled, but it never reached his eyes. He placed a hand on Sarah's arm, a gesture of possession rather than comfort, and gave her a look I did not understand. But Sarah understood it perfectly. She straightened, took a breath, and delivered words that shattered what remained of my composure. "Mom's gone now, Dad. And honestly, you're dead to us too." The air left my lungs. I heard gasps from nearby mourners who had not yet departed. But I did not crumble. 40 years of contract negotiations, of difficult clients and impossible deadlines, had taught me to hold steady when the ground shifted beneath my feet. So I stood there, absorbing the blow, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable for everyone except me. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew Margaret's old leather wallet, the one she had carried for 30 years. "If that's how you feel," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "then let me show you her last wish." I noticed a woman standing apart from the remaining mourners. She was perhaps in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and an expression I could not quite read. She watched the scene unfold with an intensity that seemed personal, as if she recognized something in the cruelty playing out before her. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small nod, almost imperceptible, before looking away. Everyone fell silent as I opened the wallet and removed an old silver card with an engraving that caught the light. The words etched into the metal read, "Legacy Access." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He had never seen this before, and for the first time since he approached me, uncertainty flickered across his face. I stood there holding the card, watching Marcus's confusion give way to something darker, and my mind traveled back to the moment Margaret had placed it in my hands 2 weeks earlier, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. My wife had prepared me for a battle I did not yet know was coming. The cancer had moved quickly in those final months, stealing her strength piece by piece until she could barely lift her head from the pillow. But her mind remained untouched, sharp as the day I married her, perhaps sharper. The nurses commented on it with admiration. "Most patients at this stage drift," one of them told me. "Your wife is still running the show." They did not know how right they were. Margaret waited until we were alone, until the door clicked shut and the shuffle of footsteps faded down the hallway. Then she gripped my hand with a strength that startled me, her thin fingers pressing into my palm like she was trying to transfer something vital through touch alone. "Luther," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the machines surrounding her. "I need you to listen carefully. I know what's coming. I've seen who Marcus really is." I leaned closer, confused by the urgency in her tone. We had discussed Marcus before, of course. I had shared my concerns about how he seemed to dominate Sarah, how he controlled their finances and their social calendar, and, increasingly, their visits to us. But Margaret had always counseled patience. "Give her time," she would say. "Sarah chose him, and we must respect that." Now, in this sterile room with death hovering at the edges, her tune had changed completely. "What do you mean?" I asked. "What have you seen?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she reached beneath her pillow and withdrew a small silver card, the same one I now held at her funeral. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. "This is a legacy access card from First National Bank. I opened the account in 1994, the year Sarah graduated high school. I've been adding to it ever since, quietly, without telling anyone. The access code is our wedding anniversary. Memorize it. Never write it down." I stared at the card, its surface cool against my skin. "Margaret, what is this about? Why are you telling me now?" Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She had always been stronger than me in the ways that mattered. "When they betray you, Luther, and they will, use this card. Go to the bank. Everything you need is there. Documents, money, proof. I've spent years preparing for this moment, praying it would never come, knowing it probably would." The word betrayal hung in the air between us. I wanted to argue, to defend our daughter, to insist that family would never turn against family. But something in her expression stopped me. She had never looked at me with such certainty, such sorrowful knowledge. "I know what it feels like," she continued, her voice dropping even lower, "to be unwanted in your own family. I won't let that happen to you. I won't let him take everything we built." The word struck me as strange. Margaret had always spoken fondly of her childhood, her parents, her siblings. What did she mean, unwanted? I opened my mouth to ask, but she shook her head slightly, as if that story was for another time, or perhaps no time at all. "Pastor Reeves knows everything," she said. Find him when you're ready. He's holding something for you, something I couldn't risk leaving anywhere else." She paused, her breathing growing more labored. "And Luther, promise me one thing. Don't let them take your dignity. Fight back, but fight smart. Dignity is all we ever really own. Everything else can be stolen." I promised. What else could I do? My wife lay dying, trusting me with secrets I did not understand, and all I could offer was my word. The medication pulled her towards sleep. Her eyelids fluttered, and I thought she had drifted off. But then her lips moved one final time, forming words I had to strain to hear. "The neighbor," she breathed. "Nora. She'll understand." Then she was gone. Not dead yet, but somewhere beyond my reach, leaving me alone with a silver card, a code, and questions that would haunt me for weeks. I didn't sleep the night after the funeral. I sat in the living room Margaret had decorated 30 years ago, surrounded by photographs of a life that now felt like a story someone else had lived. Her words echoed in the silence. The neighbor. Nora. She'll understand. I did not know any neighbor named Nora. Did not understand what Margaret wanted me to find. But I kept the silver card in my pocket, pressed against my chest like a talisman, and waited for morning to bring clarity. What morning brought instead was Marcus. He arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, his car pulling into my driveway with the precision of someone who had been planning this visit for longer than one night. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, and I watched through the window as Marcus spoke to her, gesturing toward the house, his expression animated and determined. Sarah nodded along like a puppet whose strings had been pulled so many times she no longer noticed the hands controlling her. I opened the door before he could knock. Some instinct told me not to let him set the terms of this encounter, not to give him the satisfaction of summoning me, like a servant in my own home. "Luther," he said, brushing past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk about the practical matters. I know yesterday was emotional, but life moves forward, and there are things that need to be handled." Sarah followed him inside, her eyes fixed on the floor. She did not greet me. She did not offer condolences for the mother we had buried less than 24 hours ago. She simply stood near the doorway, like a guard awaiting orders. Marcus walked through the living room as if conducting an inspection, his gaze sweeping over the furniture, the paintings, the china cabinet Margaret had inherited from her grandmother. I could almost see him calculating values, assigning prices, mentally liquidating 45 years of memories into dollar signs. "Let's be honest," he said, turning to face me with a smile that held no warmth. "You're 70 years old, Luther. You can't maintain this place alone. The yard work, the repairs, the bills, it's too much for a man your age, especially now that Margaret is gone. Sarah and I have discussed it, and we think the best thing for everyone is if we take over. The house, the accounts, the cars. We'll handle everything so you don't have to worry." The audacity of his words stole my breath for a moment. He spoke as if he were offering charity, as if stripping me of everything I owned was an act of kindness rather than theft dressed in concern. "No," I said. The word came out quieter than I intended, but firm. Marcus's smile flickered. "Excuse me." I said no. This is my home. Margaret and I built this life together, and I intend to continue living it. I appreciate your concern, but I don't need anyone to take over anything. For a moment, something ugly flashed across his face, a glimpse of the creature beneath the polished surface. Then it vanished, replaced by exaggerated patience. "Luther, be reasonable. You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. We're trying to help you." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," I replied. And my answer is no. That was when the mask slipped entirely. Marcus's composure cracked like thin ice, and the coldness beneath poured through. "Fine," he snapped. "You want to be stubborn? Let me be clear about something. You're dead weight, Luther. A burden. Sarah has spent years tiptoeing around your feelings, pretending to care about your opinions. And for what? So you could sit in this house, hoarding money that should be going to your grandchildren? Margaret coddled you, but Margaret is gone. And without her protecting you, things are going to change." I looked at Sarah, hoping to find some flicker of protest, some sign that my daughter still existed beneath the shell Marcus had constructed around her. But she only shifted her weight from one foot to the other and mumbled something that sounded like agreement. My hand moved to my pocket, fingers finding my phone. 40 years as a contractor had taught me many things, including the value of documentation. Texas was a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of without informing the other party. I pressed the button to activate the voice recorder and kept my expression neutral. "I think you should leave," I said calmly. Marcus laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "Oh, I'm leaving. But hear this, Luther. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to come to your senses and sign over what's rightfully ours. After that, we do this the hard way." He moved toward the door, then paused to deliver his final blow. 2 weeks. Then you're out on the street. He swept out of the house with Sarah trailing behind her. She glanced back once, and for a split second, I thought I saw something like regret in her eyes. Then she was gone, the door slamming shut, leaving me alone in the silence of my violated home. I stood motionless for several minutes, letting my heartbeat slow, processing what had just happened. Then I walked to the front window and watched Marcus's car disappear down the street. As my gaze shifted, I noticed a woman working in the garden of the house next door. She was perhaps 64 or 65, with silver-streaked dark hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore gardening gloves and held a small trowel, but she was not digging. She was watching me. Our eyes met, and she set down her tools. Slowly, she walked to the fence that separated our properties and waited there, as if giving me the choice to approach or retreat. Something about her stillness, her patience, drew me forward. "Mr. Grant," she said softly as I reached the fence. "I'm Nora Williams. I moved in about 18 months ago, though I don't think we've properly met. I'm so sorry about your wife." "Thank you," I managed. She studied my face with an expression I could not quite name. It was not pity, not mere sympathy. It was something deeper, something that suggested she understood a pain beyond ordinary grief. "I lost my brother a few years ago," she said. "Grief takes time, Mr. Grant. More time than people want to give you. If you ever need anything, even just someone to sit with in silence, I'm right here." There was weight in her words, a significance I could not yet grasp. Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. The neighbor. "Nora, she'll understand." "Thank you, Mrs. Williams," I said. "I may take you up on that." She nodded once and returned to her garden, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I sat in darkness, unable to turn on the lights Margaret would never see again. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text from Marcus glowed on the screen. "I've already contacted a lawyer. You have no idea what's coming. Enjoy your last days in that house." I set the phone down and picked up Margaret's silver card, turning it over in my fingers. "Legacy access. 1994. Our wedding anniversary as the code. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I go to the bank. Whatever Margaret left for me, it was time to find out.